everyone. This is the May 16th, 2023 meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I'll call it to order. Is there a motion on the Clerk General?
So moved.
And yes, and have you reviewed the requisitions?
Yes, they're fine with me. I'll move that we accept them.
And yes. Tiffany or Tina, do you have anything you want to bring forward? I'm sorry, Tina's not here, Lord.
We've got one add-on. I've got a resolution to authorize the president of the board to sign permit applications from the Ohio Department of Commerce, Division of Liquor Control for 2 events at the Warren County Fairgrounds.
All right, so moved.
And yes. Okay, so I guess Trevor, here we are again for our work session on the master facilities plan.
Back again. Good morning.
Good
Mr.
morning.
Young will be here. He's just running slightly late, so.
Okay. No problems. So last time I was here, we discussed this first phase of the master plan study. We talked about demolishing the old jail and the SWAT garage. We talked about building a new county court facility, possibly a new facilities management building. So I think we were all in agreement that the jail is ready to be demolished, that we explored all of our options for repurposing that building and our most cost-effective solutions to demolish it. So I think we're all in agreement on that aspect. We talked about the placement of the new county court building. There was some discussion about whether we should add some other departments to that new building, such as Board of Elections or Health and Human Services. The board requested that I bring the architects back in to answer some questions related to that. So we do have our criteria architect with us today, Jim Boris from BSWC Architects. And we also have the master plan architect, Mike Murphy from Champlin Architecture. He's with us today to answer any questions you have. So the 2 goals for today, I'd like to finalize the plan for the general placement of the new county court building, and if we want to build it as a standalone building or possibly add Board of Elections or another department to it. Once we get that finalized, we can move forward with the design build phase of the project. My second goal today is, part of this project, we do have to demolish the SWAT garage. So we do need to start the process of replacing that building, since we're going to displace their tactical vehicles, their equipment, all that. We need to get that process started. So I would like to get approval from the board today to pursue a criteria architect for that project as well. So if we can bring the visual up here, do I need to do it from here?
I do think, Trevor, one question that Commissioner Grossman had was whether it was a possibility of adding on to the Common Pleas Court building in addition to, do we add more, if it's a standalone building versus the previous conversations about adding on to the end of that building and what that looked like relative to that court and
I was also wondering what, if you did that, if you go up as opposed to just simply having these 1-story buildings, whether that would be more efficient and a better use of our space, leaving open space then in other areas for future development.
We did explore that option during the master plan study with Mr. Murphy here. Domestic relations expanding into that space is imminent. That's probably something within the 5 to 10 years they're going to have to expand. So if we added county court into that area, you would probably have to go 3 stories at least. You would be squeezing a lot into a very small footprint there. So we determined during the master plan study that that really isn't feasible to try to put all that in that one space. So what we discussed was numbers 1 and 3. There would be the old jail and the SWAT garage being demolished. So we discussed building the new county court facility where number 1 is the yellow block. I guess I'll just open it up now to any questions you guys have about the placement of that building. If you have any questions about adding Board of Elections to that facility, facility, or are you comfortable with moving forward with this plan, with that placement?
So I want to go back to the question you answered, where you looked at adding on to the current Common Pleas Court building. So what would that add-on look like? Where's that going to go?
Take the mic.
Always forget that. That would be on this end of Common Pleas right here. There's a
Just go
small
straight
footprint
out?
here.
Just go
Correct.
straight out? How
Yeah,
far
it's
out would you
gonna
go?
fill basically the grass area that's right there.
So that's very little.
Correct. Yeah.
So-
It's enough for domestic relations. It's enough to fit their
Well,
expansion.
if you were to do something that was a bit larger, then if you go up, like you're talking about there, but then you go off to the east, wouldn't that work?
Well, we can't build in this area back here because of the grade. And if we get county court and domestic relations all in that area, the parking lot, we run out of parking for that area. There's
Well,
nowhere
where's the
to
park?
expand
So the
that.
parking is all back in this,
Correct. All this white is currently parking.
Oh, I know
in
that.
building, yeah.
so you can't add other parking in there because you don't want to cross the street, is that the problem?
Over here,
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes.
yeah, the court parking would have to park over here and walk across.
Well, once you expand in that direction, you could be pretty close to that.
Correct.
But that wouldn't be, that's a problem because you'd have to cross that street that goes back to the probate juvenile court.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the problem.
I'm not saying it's a problem. It's just that's where people would have to park as overflow parking for the courthouse. And this addition onto this building would have to be at least 3 stories tall to fit county court, domestic relations, all that into.
Well, I'm looking at the footprint of your county court building. It doesn't look like it's that large.
Yeah, we only have about 15,000 square feet here. This is a 22,000 square foot building. Domestic relations.
And you're saying because of the grade of the property, you can't go to the east towards where the probate and the,
Correct. This rises. You can't tell in this drawing, but this rises
And you-
sharply here.
okay, and you can't excavate that and dig it into the hillside?
Not without doing some major retaining work out around this. There's probably a good 30-foot incline right here in this small area where it grades up to the bike trail.
All right.
This was the area we looked at building county court last year, and we couldn't even fit it back there and make it work in that space. That's just because of the topography of the land back there and the parking restrictions. Cost-wise too, we really wouldn't gain anything by building that county court addition 3 stories over here versus building a standalone facility on this side.
Is a standalone facility more economic to build than to build up?
Actually, I'll let our architect team answer that, so do one of you guys want to take that question? Or?
So our opinion is that.
Can you please state your name and affiliation
Yeah.
for the record, please?
Sure. I'm Jim Forrest with VSWC Architects, and we work with Trevor on the planning of the county courts building. So we did look at lots of options and stuff adding on to this building, and it was strongly determined that really this space needed to be reserved for this court building, and there just really was not the room to do both of these things on that area right there. So I think it was a really good decision in the master planning we looked at this originally. I think that was a good decision to move that across the street. So the question on the 2-story is compared with the single story. Basically, our thoughts on it is you do have a lot of land out here to use. And because of security reasons, trying to keep security on 2 different levels, you have to have 2 stairwells, of course. You have elevators. You have ADA accessibility type issues that certainly for the function of the court buildings, the single story is much more functional for the use. So, I mean, that's kind of where we fell on it. We don't think it's tremendously cheaper or more economical to do 2 stories because, again, you're losing square footage with stairwells and the elevators, and you have to build more restrooms on the second floor whenever you have people up there, so you're duplicating restrooms, a lot of those type issues. So our recommendation would be go with the single story.
And those are options we explored during this whole master plan study and the criteria architect phase of that. We did look at all those different options.
Okay.
Good morning, dude. We were just discussing, Tom had asked about building county court as a multi-story addition over here onto the Common Pleas Courthouse. We just discussed with our architect team that it's just as cost-effective to build it over here as a standalone facility as it would be to build a multi-story addition onto this building. Dave, we are joined this morning by our criteria architect, Jim Boris from VSWC Architects, and Mike Murphy. He's our master plan architect from Champlin Architecture. So they're here to answer any questions you have this morning. So I told Shannon and Tom that the goal this morning was to determine the general placement of this county court facility and if we want to build it as a standalone building. And the second goal was to get your approval to move forward with the process to build a new SWAT garage facility since it's going to get demolished as part of this plan. So I basically opened the floor to any questions you guys had regarding the placement of the new building, your thoughts on standalone versus adding maybe Board of Elections or the Health and Human Services to that new building.
I think it was an important discussion to talk about and fully vet is two-story, does it make more sense to connect it right there? I agree with the discussion and making sure that the architects understood. And can you give me the 15-second synopsis on why going up 2 stories isn't as?
Yeah, there's a lot of added square footage when you go up multi-stories because you're adding stairwells, elevators. You have to duplicate public restrooms on multiple floors of the building, whereas on a 1-story building, you can have one set of public restrooms. You don't have the stairwells. You don't have the ADA issues involved in that. So it makes less square footage to accomplish the same thing.
Well, of course, we did this building with multi-stories, and obviously this has worked really well, right?
Correct.
Okay, so multi-stories does work well. Is if you do the higher level for the Board of Elections, is that also a problem? Because you wouldn't want to have the Board of, so I think that the security questions of having defendants or people that are coming from a jail or something like that going into a courthouse and not wanting to transport them upstairs, okay, maybe that's a legitimate concern. But if you keep the court facility on the first floor and put, say, the Board of Elections on the second story, does that make more sense? Instead of putting a Board of Elections someplace else on this campus, in a standalone building again?
Yeah, I think, with Board of Elections, one of their biggest issues in their building is storage. Another issue is just space for the public when they come in to vote. So the standalone facility enables them to have loading docks at the new facility. It enables them to possibly move over and use these 650 parking spaces we have available over here on this part of the campus to alleviate all that congestion during the early voting cycle. I think where you'll get into trouble with putting Board of Elections on a second floor of a building is just the accessibility to the public, getting them up there, especially when you have 1,000 to 1,500 people showing up on a Saturday during early voting, navigating their way up and down that part of the building, so.
When they were on the third floor of this building, how'd they do that?
We didn't have early vote, we didn't really have early voting then.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we didn't, and it was an issue for them to be on the third floor, especially with their storage, moving their equipment up and down. It just was not efficient for them to be on the third floor. That was one of the reasons when we did construct the new Justice Drive office building, that they are kind of on that bottom floor with the sally port, to make it more accessible.
I think they currently have 70-some voting precincts now, and, you know, just a massive amount of equipment they have to move in and out during every election.
70 voting precincts? Oh, there's like over 200, I think. In the
Or
county you're talking
or
about?
voting locations.
Voting,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
locations.
Oh, okay, okay. So you're talking about polling places, not precincts?
right.
Okay.
I would just say from experience, when they had it up on the third floor, now while it was compressed in time and didn't happen every day, when it was voting time and you heard those machines moving back and forth, it really upset the third floor just from a noise perspective as they were moving them and sliding them. So it is definitely noticeable from an office perspective.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how much we look in the rearview mirror of why wasn't Board of Elections done better when we built a brand-new building there for whatever reason, and I thought all of this was vetted when we did it. We certainly asked these questions, didn't we, Tiff? The way it was designed, and thought it was gonna be for the next 20 years or what have you.
The rules have changed too, you know, I mean, they're constantly changing and their operation constantly changes and new expectations are placed on them from the state. So at the time, I think we thought we were doing the right thing, and we did do the right thing for that period of time.
That's true, so much more
Sure,
expanded voting
absolutely,
and all the
absolutely.
things like that. There's
Yeah.
just so many members of the public that come and use the centralized Board of Elections. I'm a big fan of utilizing, or putting the Board of Elections contiguous with our main parking lot. I just think that's always an issue, and that's so underutilized. I like that there in the, you know, the timing of that is open to question, but the county court building, I thought it was important. So you're saying that with all of the additional costs, and then it would be who would we put there in the county court building, that even though your cement cost, the footprint, the frame of the building is cheaper because you're going up, I mean, at least you're not using as much land and as much construction material is going out as opposed to some of it going straight up. You're saying that by the time you account for all of the extra things under the ADA and things like that we have to account for, that it's really not any cost savings.
Yeah, it's basically a wash at that point. And something we discussed last time too, one of the advantages of these standalone facilities is for future growth. When you build a standalone facility, 30 years from now, if they outgrow that facility, it's a lot easier to add on if that building's standing independently than if we have 3 or 4 departments in there and they all need to expand. It really limits your future growth.
Unless you build an extra floor, which is one of the things we talked about at the previous building, was we mothball, we frame it in, but then we don't actually build it out. Because we know we're gonna grow, we know
Correct.
we need additional space.
So this slide we have up here would show if we built county court up here where the SWAT garage and the old jail is now, that would be the county court location. They would have roughly 200 parking spaces available out in the front. This was the potential facilities management building here. We had discussed moving it from here to here to open all this up to future growth in this space, possibly Board of Elections or Health and Human Services to use this parking lot. Because right now, facilities management doesn't need that parking. It's no use to us whatsoever, so.
Didn't you have a slide, Trevor, with buildings placed there? A new
Yeah.
slide that had buildings placed there?
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
I have it on this presentation.
Okay.
But it was on the original slide deck that we got.
Yeah, it was actually kind of a change, I think the last time you came, you showed them, because we didn't really have anything there, I think originally.
Right.
But then they came back with a much better idea of placing, to your point, Dave, about placing a building in that green space where the number 2 is, to be able to utilize that parking area, either whether it was Human Services pushed back or a Board of Elections pushed back.
Yeah, this is the Health and Human Services building in red here. So it could come back here, it could move up in front of the current building. Board of Elections could sit here. It really opens up a lot of building space out through here.
And better utilizes the parking.
Correct, correct.
And just the overall efficiency of the driveway being relocated, the circulation would be much better with Health and Human Services building moving or being relocated.
Much easier for the public to find the Board of Elections building if it's out here in this area. They could access off of East Street, off of Justice Drive. Much easier for them.
So Trevor, can you remind us in terms of the phasing and time frame around demolishing the old jail, erecting the new court building, building the new SWAT garage? Like, what kind of time frame are we looking at there?
So I believe this fall we could tackle the first phase, which is demolish all the old jail area here in red and the SWAT garage. That could most likely happen this fall to clear the space. Meanwhile, we could start the design build phase for County Court, which is actually designing the final building and hiring a builder. So we get these out of the way first. The next step would be building the county court building, which probably most likely couldn't break ground until next spring. You know, we're probably close to a year away from being prepared to do that. That building gets built while county court is still occupying the front of their building here. Once that's finished, these folks move over into the new space, and then this gets demolished out here.
And what is the time frame for the SWAT garage?
That would be happening simultaneously. That process, I believe we need to move forward with getting a criteria architect right now to help us determine where we want to build that, what style of building we want to build.
And are we focusing only on SWAT, or are we gonna try to combine with the drug task force?
That's something we can explore with the criteria architect. They could get us budget numbers both ways. You
I
know,
think we should definitely look at a combination potentially,
Gotcha.
simply because we spend so much on just lease payments.
yeah. And I'm prepared, you know, I can put out an RFQ here shortly, you know, for a criteria architect for that project. So the next slide shows moving the facilities building back here. Demolishing these current buildings we're in now and building new back here. I had discussions with Jim and Mike about, you know, are there cost efficiencies in doing county court and facilities at the same time? Having a builder come in to build both buildings, just so you're mobilizing one time with a contractor, and the disturbance it would be to the new county court if we, right after we move them in, if we start building a building right next door to it. Do you guys have any questions or thoughts on relocating facilities management back here to open up this building area?
Well, I'm curious first of what their answer was when you asked them that question.
Well, fortunately, I brought those two gentlemen with me today. So, do either of you want to speak to that?
I'm Mike Murphy with Champlin Architecture. The short of it is, sure, there's some efficiency in doing so, and then it becomes more of a kind of a prioritization and a funding decision from your standpoint, because obviously building an extra, 75% more square footage costs a little bit more. So what is it that you wish to do? There are other options related to the facilities management as a building. We did talk during the master planning process whether that building could be kind of combined with other sort of programmatic buildings. We talked about the fact that loading dock is used by Board of Elections as well as facilities management, and was there some efficiencies in building maybe a slightly larger one that they both could share? That became a little bit of a challenge in the discussion. However, you could build the facilities management building kind of contiguous with the county court building as a single entity. Parking becomes a little bit of a challenge, but those are some options that are worth exploring once you determine what kind of funding levels you're interested in allocating at what time, and then kind of talking that through with whatever criteria architect you hire.
But I think the answer to your question is about what is the prospective cost savings in doing that. I mean, that's ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not, it's not like we have a blank check, but we certainly appreciate frugality and planning. And so if you were to tell me that we would save 5% or 10% or 20% doing it together, that would dictate or at least be a factor in determining how much I'm willing to spend.
Let me answer that one a little bit obliquely. The savings you're going to realize is not so much in the combination of building multiple square footages at the same time. It's about the eliminating the time frame between when you build the second square footage and eliminating the escalation of costs of
Yeah.
labor and materials. So it's not that going from building 30,000 to building 60,000 square feet saves you a whole lot. You still pay the amount you pay per square foot. There certainly are some efficiencies that you build in. But where you really save it is if you do it in 2 years and materials have gone up 20%. That's where your real savings is.
Which we could say for everything in perpetuity. It's
Correct.
Everything costs more in the future, and if you build it now or you do it now, it's less than if you do it later.
Yeah.
So there's nothing unique about this topography or this location that is.
And if we built them as two separate buildings by one contractor, or built them as one contiguous building by one contractor, there might be a little bit of cost savings building them contiguously, but it's not dramatic. It's not a ton.
The time value of money.
So what do we need to decide today, Trevor?
I guess first is, do you want to build a county court as a standalone facility?
All right, well, you've already told us that every other location is bad, and boiling up is bad, and you brought in experts that overcome my reluctance to do this, so I'll go along with that. Second off, you wanted to change the location of this facilities thing at the same time. You need that
Correct.
today as well?
Yes, if possible. If
Yeah, I
you're
mean, my
prepared.
only thought on the facilities building, since there is a lot of storage, you have a lot of open space, a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Board of Elections also needs a lot of storage space, although theirs is secure. That would there be any advantages of having one larger storage area where yours kind of comes off and it's, they're building up here, yours is back here, and they both, as they go backwards, they share storage, would be the only thing.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that, and you still want to move it up here though towards this parking area then, like.
Correct, but I'm
Board of
just saying some
Elections
sort of an
with us
L-shaped, to where there can be some common storage under the understanding that, Board of Elections is much more secure. But again, then you have one roof, I know there's a savings there, period. There's a savings of having one roof.
Yeah, I think the Board of Elections too, theirs has to be climate controlled. Does it not have to be climate controlled? So
Yeah.
we'd have to look at how, because lawnmowers don't need to be climate controlled. Yeah, so I mean, we'd have to work that out,
we
but it's
still
definitely
have
something you could
time on
explore.
that,
Yeah,
right?
there's all
Like,
sorts of stuff we can
Yeah.
do with that.
What we really have to move forward today with, as I understand it, is the question of the location of the court,
Correct.
the demolition of the jail, but it's the architect for the SWAT garage.
Correct.
Knowing then that we have some time to explore, as was suggested, some other options as you're talking about are there some efficiencies to the, co-locating facilities and board or what have you? Correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the bottom line is we have delayed and studied and done everything possible with county court. We need to move forward with that. They are out of space. It's very inefficient right now. We know that. We, at the same time, know that we had a plan with the jail. We looked at multiple options of trying to repurpose the jail for other public purposes, all of which failed. It's just a very terribly inefficient building and very costly to maintain.
Correct.
So, starting anew, and the public know, we hate tearing down public assets, but that's been around since what, 1996? And things have changed dramatically. Our new jail is functioning
Yep.
very well. We don't have a purpose for that, so going ahead and moving on from that and then saying, yes, now we have open space, and now we've factored in the parking of what's the max utilization for parking for the county court when they have their big open forum, or everybody comes in on the 1 or 2 nights a week they do that. Yes, there's an adequate parking to do that up in this new location, then I'm fine with it.
Gotcha. So what I'll do is we'll finish up the criteria phase of the county court building with Jim and his team, and then we'll put out the RFQ for a design build team to build that new building. I'll also put together the RFQ for a criteria architect for a new SWAT building, and we'll explore whether we want to just replicate what they have now, or if we want to add DTF into that facility as well. So.
Clerk, any thoughts, Mr. Spaeth?
No better than to offer a microphone to an elected official. But yeah, I appreciate what Trevor said, and I'm trying to move on from being a little myopic on county court situation, which is part of my bailiwick. But the bigger picture, I'm pretty impressed with what he's put together, and understanding that the Board of Elections and the county court are both probably best primarily ground floor level operations. So whatever we can do to keep that going. When the Board of Elections was on the 3rd floor here, it was almost like, whoa, we made a mistake. We're way up here and out of the way. But you're right, things change, Tiff, and the laws change, so we understand that in all of our different departments. But I like what I've seen. I think it ties in with being able to add that second roadway infrastructure back into the facility because of other issues on the campus. And so trying to move on to a bigger picture detail in my mind, I think you're on the right track. I think the opening up of the space and moving Health and Human Services, getting Board of Elections taken care of, allowing for more expansion in that newer 520 building. There's going to be some other possibilities, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other discussion by the board? Trevor, you have what you need?
Yep.
Terrific. Thank you all for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much. Okay, we're 13 minutes over for our public hearing on amendments to the Warren County subdivision regulations. So first I'll hear from RPC.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Cameron Grushinsky, and this morning I will be presenting the subdivision regulations and the 21 proposed amendments that we have for the Warren County subdivision regulations. So there are 21 amendments, so I'll try to go through this pretty quickly, but if you have any questions or want me to provide any clarification for any of these, please just let me know, and I'm happy to do so. Starting off at the process, this was shown to the Subdivision Review Committee for their amendment review, and then to the Regional Planning Commission for their recommendation.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, and then just on to the Regional Planning Commission for their adoption, or I'm sorry, for their recommendation, and then to the Board of County Commissioners today for your decision, and then onwards to the RPC staff for certification. And for the purpose of these amendments, it is mainly for interpretation and clerical clarification, and then the addition of the lot modification to section 322. For minor subdivisions, that's concerning lot consolidations as they pertain to the Ohio Revised Code. And I have these broken up by article as well. So for Article 2, definitions, there are 8 amendments. First up, Section 201 definitions. This is for the definition for comprehensive plan of Warren County, Ohio. This is just a very brief update. It states that it's adopted by the Warren County Regional Planning Commission. That's incorrect. It was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners. For congestion of population, this would just be removing per section 403 level of service standard, just not a standard that we utilize, so we would just be removing that from that definition. For density, this would just be removing net density. This is a definition we don't utilize, so there's no reason to keep it included within the subdivision regulation, so that would be removed. For easement, this states that a easement could be granted to the owner of a separate parcel of land. That doesn't really specify where that owner of a separate parcel of land may be, nor that it may be to an HOA or to a separate entity, so we would just remove that from the definition at least. For the floodplain 100 years definition, we would just be removing the regulations from the graphic because we're trying to move away from having regulations within the definitions themselves. For lot measurement, it states that a lot shall be measured as follows, and there's no additional information, so that would just be removing lot measurement entirely. For open space, it states that the open space would be deemed or approved by the Planning Commission if it's permissive. That's incorrect. That would actually just go to the proper zoning authority. And for public utility easements, that would just be adding sidewalks to public utility easement definition. For Article 3, procedures for subdivision approval, there are 5 amendments. For Section 308, preliminary plan review and approval, this just talks about limiting conditions or conditional approval to a particular phase or a number of lots for a particular year, which is never something that we've actually done. So this language, we can just get rid of all of this.
Wait a second, you're deleting that entire section?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Because when it says proposed language and then you deleted everything, that confused me for a second.
No, I mean, yeah, I know some parts are highlighted in red. We were focused on that specifically.
Wait, it's not proposed language, it's no language.
Removal.
For preliminary plan review and approval, subsection E, review criteria. This is talking about how an application needs to meet the purpose and intent of the subdivision regulations. We just want to move to make sure that this is just the standards and requirements of the subdivision regulations that the application and the preliminary plan have to meet. For section 310, preliminary plan approved.
Can you go back to that one for a second?
Yes.
Bruce, you okay with that language? Because a lot of times intent gives discretion.
It should meet objective criteria that are set forth in the regulations. So yes, I'm okay with it.
For section 310, preliminary plan approved copy, this is stating that it's a revised preliminary plan that should be submitted prior to the application for final plat. This is the incorrect process. It would actually just be an updated preliminary plan. For section 311, final plat requirements, all of the language down below is added. It states that a decrease in open space by 1%, no greater than 1 acre, may qualify as a minor amendment from the originally approved preliminary plan. This is something that we met with the home builders on, and they were asking for a little bit of leniency regarding the final plat when it comes to open space. So this would just be for minor modification. If it's anything greater than 1%, I would have to come back through for a revised preliminary. And then section 322, minor subdivisions. This is that lot modification language that I was talking about before. This is primarily only for lot consolidations, so long as they're less than 5 acres in size, unplatted and unincorporated. So this would come with a new application. It would be very similar to our minor subdivision application, which concerns lot splits. and then the lot modification would concern lot consolidation. So just breaking those up into two separate applications. And do you have any questions about this specifically?
So that's saying that someone has 5 acres here and a half an acre over here, it's technically 2 parcels. It makes it easier for them to combine into one?
It would essentially be if two parcels which are connected or adjacent, they're able to combine so long as it's under 5 acres. If it's over 5, then that's just a resurvey with the tax map office upstairs, so.
What if one's over 5 and one's, so if either one of them is over 5 acres, then it's
Right.
a bigger deal?
Correct, yeah, I mean, if it's just, a total's over 5 acres, then they just don't go through our office. It would just be a separate process they go through with the tax map.
It's less of a deal. There's less government involvement.
Okay.
For Article 4, subdivision design standards and improvement requirements, there are 4 amendments. For Section 403, traffic management, subsection B, level of service standard, this states that where urban townships have adopted traffic impact studies, we just don't have any definition for urban townships, so that would just be townships. For Section 406, right-of-way, it states that the right-of-way requirements for arterial streets will be determined at the time of preliminary plat. That's just old language from the Ohio Revised Code. It should actually be preliminary plan. Section 416, sidewalks, subsection B, this is talking about average density, requirement sidewalks within subdivisions. We don't have average density, we just have gross density, so that would just be updated to reflect that. For Section 425 lots, this is concerning panhandle lots off of the bulb of a cul-de-sac. This would just be updated language because we feel that the current language is a bit confusing. So it should just state that panhandle lots are not permitted along the bulb of a cul-de-sac, but can be deemed or approved by the proper zoning authority and the following criteria, and it just lists what would be required of the applicant just submitting some written justification as the reason to adding those panhandle lots. For Article 5, standards for PUDs, there is 1 amendment. For Section 501 objectives, this is just concerning planned unit developments. It states that which standards of these regulations may be modified if a planned unit development meets all of the following objectives. These really should just be recommendations and to the proper authority, so whether it's the township or the correct zoning authority, just updating this to reflect who would deem whether these recommendations have been met. For Article 7, required statements and signatures to be affixed on the plat, there is 1 amendment. This was brought by the Tax Map Department as just new language that was proposed by the ORC or was adopted within the ORC, just an updated notary block. So we have the current language on the left and the new language on the right. For Article 8, revisions and enforcement, there are 2 amendments. These are the last 2. It states that applications for variances may be submitted with a proposed preliminary plat or minor subdivision application. We don't do variances for minor subdivisions. That would all have to be a preliminary plan. So that's just updated to reflect that. The applications for variances must be submitted with a preliminary plan and just further specification down below as well. And then also for variances, this just states that staff will review the request and prepare a written recommendation. We don't do recommendations for variances, we just write reports for the board to consider. So those are the 21 amendments. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Bruce, you're okay with all of them?
I am.
Okay. Do we have to make a motion to adopt this?
This is a public hearing, so you need to open it up.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor or in opposition to the recommendations brought forward today?
Can't believe the public isn't lining up to speak on this.
Seeing none, I guess there's a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
And what is the pleasure?
Make a motion to adopt the amendments recommended.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Look how efficient we are. All right,
Only 9 minutes behind.
now we're only 9 minutes behind. 9:45, public hearing on amendments to the Warren County Thoroughfare Plan. Who from RPC is gonna present? Great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today as well, we are also going over the proposed amendment to the Warren County Thoroughfare Plan. This was initiated by John Candle Holmes and then was presented before the Regional Planning Commission full board for their recommendation and is here today for the decision. And looking at the subject site, we can see that it is north of Bethany, it's east of Brewer Road, south of Hamilton, and west of State Route 741. There's a line that goes through it, but it's one parcel, just between two townships. So looking at the requested amendments on the map itself, the applicant is seeking to remove the future thoroughfare plan roadways from the subject site. And here is how the current thoroughfare plan looks. There are currently 3 proposed or future collector roads that run along this site. So looking at those current future collector roads, there are 2 east-west connections that are 2 future collector roads. One's within Turtle Creek Township, that's to the north, and one is within the Deerfield Township portion, which is to the south. And there is a north-south connection as well. It's a north-south collector heading north-south. That's also within Deerfield Township. And then once again, looking at the applicant's proposal, they are looking to remove those 3 future collectors on their subject site. And alongside with removing those future collectors, they are looking to implement local subdivision streets, connecting the northern portion to State Route 741 and on the southern portion to Windermere Way, which is identified on the right. These proposed local subdivision streets are subject to RPC subdivision review, and these future local subdivision streets will not be illustrated on the future thoroughfare plan if it's adopted and amended. And looking at the jurisdictions, you can see to the north, that is Turtle Creek Township in blue. That's Deerfield Township in yellow to the south, and the surrounding gray area is the City of Mason. Looking at the zoning, you can see that the northern portion, which is within Turtle Creek Township, that's zoned single-family zone R1. That's 1 unit per 2 acres. And looking at some of the surrounding uses, there's PR Public Recreation. That's the Cheetah Run owned by the Cincinnati Zoo, and I-1 to the east, as well as R1 a little bit lower than that. And then looking at the zoning for Deerfield Township in the City of Mason, the Deerfield portion is zoned RSF, residential single family. And looking at the surrounding City of Mason zoning, there is R1 and R2 to the west, residential PUD to the south, and I-1 to the east. And looking at those surrounding land uses and the future collector locations, as I mentioned before, the northern parcel is the Cincinnati Zoo Cheetah Run, zoned PR Public Recreation within Turtle Creek Township. To the south is residential, zoned residential PUD within Mason. To the east, it's vacant, but zoned I-1 within the City of Mason. And to the west is residential vacant, zoned R1 and R2, also within the City of Mason. Looking at the future land uses, it's a little bit hard to tell on the City of Mason future land use map, but the northern portion is identified as a future land use of light industrial, and to the south is low intensity residential. Within Deerfield Township, the future land use is neighborhoods. And then looking at the Warren County future land use map, to the north, it's identified as a land use of single-family residential, and the southern portion is neighborhoods.
I missed that. Would you say the south was?
For the Warren County future land use,
Yes.
that's neighborhoods.
So both of those sections are future planning or for residences?
Correct, yes. And then just looking at the ownership of the parcel or the surrounding parcels to the north, that's owned by the Cincinnati Zoo Society. That's that purple. The red and green is the City of Mason and Morrid One LLC. To the south, in gray, it's that residential development. That's the Thorngate at Windermere subdivision. And to the west is the Mason Board of Education in brown. And just looking at the sales history, you can see it's transferred ownership a few times since 1981, and as recently as 2018 when it was sold to the State Route 741 Holdings, LLC. Looking at the environmental features, there's a water body on the adjacent site to the east, an existing creek that runs north-south along the parcel itself. There are steep slopes as well as scattered pockets of trees throughout the parcel. And then looking at some of the connections that are to the west and to the south, Batchy Trails Boulevard is to the west. It's a planned collector road connecting Mason Montgomery to State Route 741. It's located within the estates at Chestnut Hill within the City of Mason. It is not fully constructed as indicated below. It's about 1,086 feet short. And it's built to the dimensions of the City of Mason's collector roadway classification. So here are some images or photos of what Batchy Trails Boulevard looks like today. You can see westbound Batchy Trails Boulevard on the left and eastbound on the right, with the functional classification of a collector road and a right-of-way width of 60 feet and a roadway width back of curb to back of curb of 41 feet. And there was an exhibit that was sent by the City of Mason, which states that the Batchy Trails Boulevard would be extended upon the development of the school site to the northern property. That's the one that's owned by the City of Mason Board of Education.
Sorry, what did you say about that again? What was submitted?
It was an exhibit by the City of Mason.
What was the exhibit saying?
It states that the road would be constructed and connected to that property line once that northern property, which is owned by the Board of Education, is developed. And looking at Windermere Way to the south, on the City of Mason and Warren County thoroughfare plans, it is identified as a future Windermere Way, or future Windermere Way is identified as a future collector road. The City of Mason has classified it as a collector road with a 60-foot right-of-way. The paved right-of-way, there is a paved right-of-way of 30 feet leading up to the northern property line of the Thorngate at Windermere subdivision. And along with Batchy Trails Boulevard, this is not all the way up to the subject site. This stops about 50 feet short. And here is what northbound Windermere Way looks like on the left and southbound on the right. As identified, there's a functional classification of a collector road with a right-of-way width of 60 feet and a roadway width of 41 feet. Looking at the City of Mason Code of Ordinances, they identify a collector road as having a right-of-way width of 60 feet and a roadway width back of curb to back of curb of 41 feet. And on the right, you can see the City of Mason thoroughfare plan with the future collector roads identified. One other project which is proposed within the Warren County thoroughfare plan is Brewer Road. This is a future intersection alignment of Mason Montgomery and Brewer Road. The alignment of the Mason Montgomery would connect to a future collector along the Cincinnati Zoo property, and Brewer Road would extend eastward. And then looking specifically at the difference between a collector and a local subdivision street, we can see a breakdown of both. The right-of-way width for a collector is 60 feet and is the same for a local subdivision street. For a collector, the roadway and travel lane width is 36 feet and 18 feet respectively, and 24 feet and 12 feet for a local subdivision street. The speed limit, it's about a 10 miles per hour difference at 35 miles per hour for a collector and 25 for a local subdivision. There is 660 feet unsignalized and 1,320 feet signalized access spacing for a collector, and there is not access spacing for driveways on a local subdivision street. A collector would be illustrated on the thoroughfare plan and would not be on a local subdivision street. For a collector, it would require a marginal access street, which I'll get to on the next slide. But it would not be required for a local subdivision street. And then below are just the sample cross sections within the thoroughfare plan for both a collector and a local subdivision. And looking at the marginal access street, we can see that it is a local street parallel and adjacent to an arterial or collector street, which provides access to abutting properties while separating them from arterial or collector street traffic, basically just providing access for residential off of a marginal access street rather than on a collector or distributor. And looking at the applicant's proposed typical cross-section, we can see that they have a right-of-way of 60 feet, roadway width of 24 feet, with 12-foot paved lanes, and public utility easements of 15 feet. So looking at the subdivision review connectivity, essentially whether it is illustrated on the thoroughfare plan or not. If it is illustrated on the thoroughfare plan, it requires stub street connections for the approved preliminary plan. It cannot be waived by the RPC Executive Committee, meaning they cannot do access point waiver requests to take that off of the thoroughfare plan. And any change to the thoroughfare plan connections are subject to county commissioner approval if it stays on the thoroughfare plan. If that connectivity is not illustrated on the thoroughfare plan, then the Regional Planning Commission may waive those street stub connections, or they may require those street stub connections. And looking specifically at which street stub connections those may be, we can see there is the Batchy Trails Boulevard, which is to the west. The eastern parcels to the east, there's two parcels here, or the Cincinnati Zoological Society parcel that's to the north. And the RPC Executive Committee would approve or deny these street stub waivers. Looking at the engineer's office position and their recommendation, they are recommending that one collector road connecting Mason Montgomery Road to State Road 741 stays on the thoroughfare plan, and would be okay with removing the east-west future collectors located in Turtle Creek Township and the north-south future collector within Deerfield Township. And specifically, this is what their recommendation would look like. It would just be removing the northern east-west future collector and the north-south future collector. The review comments from Deerfield Township, they are recommending that all future thoroughfares on the subject site be removed.
So I'm sorry, so the engineer's office is saying basically the Batchy Trails collector remain?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
For Turtle Creek Township, they have no comments. And just to provide a quick summary over what the existing conditions are and what's proposed. So if we go back, this is what the existing conditions of the subject site look like now, with the 3 future collector roads. Here is what the applicant is requesting, removing those future collectors from the subject site and building local subdivision streets.
So the applicant is asking for, isn't that the zoo property to the north?
Correct.
But it, what, crosses his property? Why, how would they ask for the zoo
But
collector?
they only want it on the red portion here. So the zoo is up along here, and their site buds up. It's adjacent to the Cincinnati Zoo property, but
So how are they asking for a change on not their property?
it's only on their property that they're requesting. Only the red outline would be the parcel.
But you've got it outlined applicant's request, is it?
Right, so this is how it currently looks, and it's currently going over the Cincinnati Zoo property, and they're just looking to have it removed from their property. not necessarily, not from the zoo property or from surrounding parcels.
Okay.
And just looking at the Warren County Engineers Office recommendation, and this was also what the RPC board had recommended, that would be removing the north-south feature collector and the east-west feature collector to the north and the north-south collector on Deerfield Township. And that concludes my presentation. Do you guys have any questions for me?
All right now.
Great, thank you. So we will hear from all of the parties involved, but at this juncture, I guess we'd like to hear from the applicant.
So this is not a swearing in?
It's a legislative action. And if you would all state your name for the record, please, and address.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Joe Trouth. With me is Sophia Holly,
Good morning. Morning.
and we also have the Tufts representative, Matt Fellerhoff, in the back. We have,
As the property owner.
right. And then Rick Seitz is the person who has a contract on the property. We also have our engineer with us, Rick Arnold.
And so you represent whom in this?
I represent the property, or the person who has a purchase contract on the property.
Okay, so you represent the developer.
Correct.
Great,
Correct.
okay.
So John Candle Homes is the client that I represent that has the contract on the property. The property consists of 145 acres in total, of which 84 is in Deerfield Township and 61 is in Turtle Creek. And based upon my client's low density, they're only proposing 44 homes on this total acreage, so it's very, very low density. It doesn't even require some of the normal things that are required by the subdivision regs. So not only is the collector road not needed, it's really a road to nowhere. I mean, the three of them. And based upon my experience in land use over the years, this proposed thoroughfare plan is consists of an unconstitutional taking of the property. And it's totally unnecessary, and we hope that you will find that after our presentation here today, that that's the case, that it's just not needed. Again, the property consists of two parcels in Warren County, with a northern parcel in Turtle Creek Township and a southern parcel in Deerfield. Based upon the thoroughfare plan, a collector road is intended to go through the parcel in Turtle Creek. Two collector roads are intended to go through the Deerfield parcel. And Deerfield Township has already stated that they really don't want these collector roads to go there. Warren County Regional Planning Commission recommended removal of the collector road on the Turtle Creek and the northwest collector in Deerfield. So they recommended two of the three be removed. We feel that the third one is, again, totally unnecessary. Mason is in the process of developing industrial property, significant industrial property, to the east of this property. The site plan submitted by the City of Mason shows significant heavy use of that industrial property. And it is not appropriate zoning-wise, otherwise, to have industrial property go through residential property. It just makes sense. Also, there's residential property to the west, and it's not appropriate to connect residential with high-intensity commercial use. The zoo property to the northwest is land owned by the zoo, and there certainly is no need for a collector road to go through the Cheetah Run or the zoo property. So with that, I'll ask Sophia to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Sophia Hawley. I'm in real estate and litigation, and Joe Trout's partner, and I've learned a lot from him. So a lot of what I want to talk about has already been discussed by a very helpful staff report, but I want to sort of highlight some high points here. Based upon the way that the property is today, the collector roadways are not appropriate for the property that we're here before you on. This has already been reviewed, but just very generally, this is residential parcels that abut other residential parcels. They also abut a cheetah run, which is exactly what it sounds like from what I can see, a little area where cheetahs can run at the zoo. They do it several times a day. So this is residential property abutting residential. And here, as you can see, the purple area is owned by the Cincinnati Zoological Society. The green area, the lighter green area is the property before you. The brown area is Board of Education, and you can see those little channels of roads that are running through the neighborhoods that abut the property. I had a lovely opportunity to meet with Warren County staff and discuss the differences between the collector roads and local subdivision streets, which is what we're seeking here. And I think that the chart to the right of this slide, which is part of the Warren County Regional Planning Commission, identifies the difference between local subdivision streets and arterial roads quite well. So arterial roads are all about movement. So highway, we want to move things quickly, efficiently. People aren't allowed at all, very unsafe, but they're necessary. Local subdivision streets are much less. They're all about access to land. We want children to run in the streets and play ball when no one's in their cul-de-sac. We want there to be access because everyone needs access to their property, but it's the most limited access. Here, what is on the thoroughfare plan is a collector street, which is the in-between. And I would submit to you as a mother of young children, as a citizen of Ohio, as an American, I do not believe that these collector roadways are appropriate for this property. As my partner, Mr. Trout, indicated, we're seeking to develop here 44 lots on 145 acres. These are some big lots that are going to have, hopefully, families playing on them, children playing on them. There's no need for access to these 44 lots that goes to collector roadway. And here I have highlighted, this was in the staff report that was presented before the Regional Planning Commission. It's a quote from the City of Mason Code of Ordinances, and it discusses collector roads. It says, "It is essential that collector streets do not carry excessive volumes of through traffic. This would defy their purpose as well as increase the risk of accidents due to excessive speed differentials and intersections." And as we have already discussed, a collector road would be the 35 mile per hour versus 25 mile per hour, which is significant when we're looking at residential communities. And the collector street purpose is not for through traffic. And let's look a little bit more at what we're looking at developing here. Again, the engineer and the Regional Planning Commission have recommended that the thoroughfare collector road be removed entirely from the Turtle Creek property, and then the north-south one be removed from the Deerfield property. The Turtle Creek Township doesn't oppose the change that our client, John Candle Homes, is requesting. And in fact, Deerfield Township says, I don't want this on my property. Something to look at here is the cost, and it's important because I'm going to talk a little bit about the law here. Here is a estimate that has been put together with respect to the costs, And these are estimates, so they're not final, but just getting generalization based upon reasoned analysis of what's available. The segment 1, which is the one segment that the Regional Planning Commission has recommended remain, is estimated to cost $1.5 million to develop. Segment 2 is estimated to cost $1.33 million. Segment 3, $2 million, and segment 4 is $4 million. And I believe that segment 4, I'm going to go back in a moment, is the land that is on the property that's owned by the Board of Education. So removing out that segment 4 and not considering it to the extent that my client wouldn't have to develop it, that's still almost $5 million in development. Let's see if I could go back. Okay, I can. All right. So segment 1 is that yellow line. That's the one that is being recommended, and it's going to cost $1.5 million to develop in estimates, which is significant. I want to go back to, one second. I want to go back to the industrial development. Okay. Please stand by. Okay. So this is a document that was submitted by Mason with respect to the property immediately to the east, and I'm going to step closer just so we're all in the same ballpark here. So this is the property we're looking at. It is the brown property in the upper left-hand corner of this image. And this blue line is the thoroughfare that is being developed and or proposed by the City of Mason. And I want us to conceptually view this. We're hoping to put property in the area that's to the upper left-hand corner. We're hoping to put 44 residential homes. I ask you rhetorically, do you think that anyone on this blue significant industrial collector road is going to be driving to visit these homes? Do you think anyone here has any interest in stopping by these homes? What does this major industrial roadway have with respect to a relationship, reasonable relationship to the development of these two properties?
Let me make sure I understand where this is. So this is a map that was submitted by the City of Mason, or proposal?
This is a map that's been submitted by the City of Mason. It was submitted to the Warren County Regional Planning Commission staff, and it was connected to the documents that were submitted before that board.
Okay, and on the far right, that's connected to Route 42?
Yes, sir, yes.
And then that winds its way through, this property is all owned by Mason, is that right?
I am not clear as to whether it's owned by Mason, but I suspect that it's all within Mason's jurisdictions, and if I'm wrong, I hope that someone will correct me.
Mason bought property up in this area some years ago, and then I think there's been several iterations, but since I see a bunch of my friends from Mason here, I'll bet you they're going to elucidate this. But they want to have a collector road from Route 42 going through some property that I think they may have purchased and that they want to develop with industrial commercial usage. And they want to connect it all the way to 741, and then they want to go across other property that they previously bought, which is what's got the letter R on it, correct?
Correct.
And then they want to take that through the property your client has under contract.
That's right. That's right.
So I just want to make sure I'm oriented here. The parcel to the west of 741 is subject to future development for industrial, correct?
And by that, do you mean the one that has the R on it?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that that's zone industrial in Mason, and just to clarify, the property that is before you is not in Mason, but this property with the R on it, I believe, is zoned industrial. I will be corrected if I'm wrong, and I believe that the bottom half is owned by a private entity, and the top half is owned by the City of Mason.
Well, I think the entire property used to be owned by Mason. I mean, Mason bought that property after the owner and the developer, Nyer, came to Mason and stated that they couldn't develop it commercial, industrial, and they sought zoning to make it residential. Mason declined to do that. I was on council at the time, and as a result of declining to change the zoning requested by the owner and the developer, Mason purchased the property and then has developed it, or has started to.
And so the blue dot, or I guess it's not a dot, the round part of the blue, that's 741. And then traveling to the east is, to where the blue line ends is 42, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so there is an existing collector road between what is now potential industrial property between 741 and 42.
No, there is not. I don't think there's any road there at all.
There's nothing there at all. That's just what's proposed.
I think that's right. Well, Mason will
But
tell
not
us
in
that.
question for this I understand it's not, I'm just trying to understand what this subdivision would be connecting to.
I believe that's all correct.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, those are good questions. Okay, let's go back. So we're seeing what we're trying to, what I'm requesting, what we're requesting you avoid connecting to. And again, the tremendous cost that's associated with this. All right, so the next part I'm going to go into is the legal part. And I oftentimes talk to people and make requests before governmental bodies such as yourselves, and the thought might be, well, you're not my attorney, that's true. You have a wonderful attorney, Mr. Bruce McGarry, and the thought might be that, well, I don't necessarily want to make a legal decision. And I'm a litigator, and I try cases in front of juries, and I'm very blessed to be able to do that. And the wonderful thing about being a jury member is that anyone can be a jury member, anyone who is a jury of your peers. I believe personally that the requisite education level to be a good juror in many instances is middle school, maybe high school. So I think that everyone in this room is qualified to make decisions. Lawyers aren't always that fancy. Okay, with that said, we're going to now move into the legal part, and I want to discuss with you the parameters of constitutional takings and allow you to consider what your viewpoint is on it. I'm advocating for my client, and so it's my position that the requirement of putting in this $1.5 to $5 million thoroughfare is unconstitutional. Your attorney is certainly qualified. Your attorney's been doing this longer than I have, so your attorney can make comments to the extent to which he disagrees with me. I'm simply requesting that you consider these factors and consider whether you agree with me based upon the facts here, because in the event that we are forced to put in this collector road, we would have to consider litigation, and the only one who wins there is me because I get paid hourly. But I don't think it's I don't think that it is such a close call here that is necessary, and I mean that as respectfully as possible. But all right, let's go into this. Constitutional protection of land rights. Property rights are very important, I think, to Americans. I used to like to say that I want to be able to go in my backyard in my bathing suit without anyone bothering me. And then my husband would say that he wants to be able to go in my backyard in my bathing suit without anyone bothering him. He has a funny sense of humor. But basically, we should be able to do things in our property unless they restrict or violate the government. Obviously, it is important that we protect thoroughfares, that we have connection, that we have public schools. I mean, it's important for the government to intervene, but it's also important for there to be your right to exercise your property rights. So the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the government may not deny a benefit to a person because he exercises a constitutional right. So when there is a condition of development on property rights, there must be a nexus or rough proportionality between the property that the government demands and the costs of the applicant's proposal. So let's dig into that a little bit more. In Ohio, the test has been stated as follows. 1, is there a reasonable connection between the need for additional capital facilities and growth in population generated by the subdivision? And 2, if a reasonable connection exists, is there a reasonable connection between the expenditure of costs and the benefit accruing to the subdivision? That's the test. I sent letters to your counsel, Mr. McGarry, on April 25th and May 3rd, outlining this case law and inviting him to bring any questions or comments with respect to it to my attention. He might have them, and he might have decided not to share them with me, but be that as it may, we've researched it. Mr. Trouth has been doing this for a very long time, and I've been doing it longer, hopefully, than I appear to look. But be that as it may, this is the case law. To the extent to which your counsel disagrees with it, he can.
So Counselor, can I ask a question? So you're saying that Ohio law is saying that essentially for a governmental purpose, there has to be a direct nexus between the actual development. So you have entity over here, entity over here, two roads coming like this, middle, you're saying government can't force that middle if there's not a direct nexus of it's not benefiting this property? Is that what you're saying?
So, yes, I am saying that there's a test. Because if you are requiring, if you don't meet this test, if there's an unreasonable connection, then it's a constitutional taking, because you're taking my property, or in this instance, my client's property. So let's put a different example in. Let's say that we want to develop this property, this isn't the case, and Warren County said, okay, you can develop this property, but we need you to put a highway in your property, and we also need you to give us 2 acres, and we also need you to build a park on it. And if you do that, then we will allow you to develop this property. Well, surely there's no connection for that. And there have been cases where it's a fine balance, but where the government steps in and asks to do things that are inappropriate. There's one seminal Supreme Court case where someone wanted to develop some wetlands, and the government said, you could develop this wetlands, but we want you to donate 10 acres of your 18-acre development, and even though you want to build 8 acres, we're only letting you build 1 acre on this property. And that was a case that was very significantly finding in the favor of the property owner that it's not fair for you to say that I can only develop 1 acre of my land, and that you're going to take 10 acres, and that I can't develop these other 7 acres. There's no reasonable connection. The government needs to be restricted in some instances. And this is really a legal question, and I'm giving you the information and advocating on behalf of my client. Does that answer your question?
For the most part, but yeah, I'm trying to think of, we've had farmers in eastern Warren County that had I-71 go through, and there is no, well, wait, there's not even an off-ramp here. So, but there is a public purpose of connecting it on that straight line, so it goes through someone's property, but that they're getting paid for that because that is a taking.
ODOT, yeah, and ODOT has the power to take, and that's separate, but that, I think, highlights it.
So that's a taking, so that is a public, just so I understand, that's a public taking of, highway or what have you, versus this is a rule about the size of the road and the purpose of the road through this collector verbiage of saying we have a public purpose of trying to move more traffic than a normal residential area. It's not a highway, but we're trying to have a different category of road across this parcel, and that's essentially this argument on this parcel.
Yes, and I think you highlight a good distinction. 1, can the government take the property? And 2, separate question, is a requirement a taking? Because the government can take a property for public use, and then you'll see some cases where the government wants to take an easement, and then it goes up to litigation, and then they say, well, you've requested a whole acre, but actually you only need half an acre for this easement, so the extra half acre isn't necessary for the government's use. Those are 2 different issues. Have I muddied the waters?
Sure, but I think you would concede that if government wanted a road to go across this particular development to connect 2 roads, that is, we have the right to do that, correct? A road?
If it's paid for. If it's paid for. Okay. And it's so go on.
Let me ask you a question on that. Is that the issue? Is the issue here that if this is a taking, and I'm really curious to see what Mason has to say about this, but it seems to me, I read your letter, and I read the law, it seems like it's a taking. So the solution for them, if Mason really wants this road in jurisdictions that's not their jurisdiction, they need to buy it? Is that the point?
Well, the question becomes, does Mason have the authority to buy property that's not within its jurisdiction?
Well, I know it's not within their jurisdiction, but my question is, is your argument that to us, if we don't remove this, we, Warren County, are in essence taking it and we need to buy it because it's in our county?
It is in
And
your
we're
county.
the one that's demanding this to stay here, so we're taking it now, we gotta pay for it.
That's the argument, but if I may,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's my problem. My problem is, and I've been on the commission since 2015, Dave's been on it since 2005. I don't remember ever taking people's property like this.
well, and as my next slide sort of highlights, I think there's both practical and legal considerations here, because there's the legal considerations we were just discussing, but there's also the practical consideration, loss in developable land, like this is taking away from the ability to develop this property. Safety concerns for residents and children, there are legitimate safety concerns. My children are 2 years and 3.5 months. Do you know how many times that they run into oncoming traffic when I'm with them? Every time. Every time they run into oncoming traffic. I literally have dropped my purse in public. They're both 2. It's a very difficult age. I have a lot of safety concerns for having a road of this high capacity. And as we looked at the images before, this road, this collector road, is not going to be a destination subdivision. Nobody's going to be stopping in the subdivision. Perhaps maybe some of the few residents might jump on it, but they don't need such a road, such a dangerous road. There's also property value considerations. I mean, this property is currently vacant. It's going to be developed into some really nice homes. That's going to increase your taxes, which are going to help the community. To the extent to which there is a collector road running through it, I think there could be concerns that devalues the property. I think there could be concerns it devalues the other neighborhoods, because this isn't the only neighborhood we're looking at developing here. There's other ones. Let's look and see. Yeah, this one works. There's other neighborhoods. There's neighborhoods already there. Collector roads are meant to be that in between. They're not meant to be just driving through. That's part of the Mason's Code of Ordinances. So we want to be concerned about the neighborhoods that already exist. We want to be concerned about the neighborhoods that are planned to be put in. There's even neighborhoods over here to the east. So legal considerations and practical considerations.
But Counselor, and again, sometimes Attorney Trouth has been before me lots of times, and I sometimes argue against myself. So this doesn't mean this is what my position is, but isn't there a reasonable expectation that we all, as Americans, as you like to say, benefit from having a road network that connects us? That it's a reasonable proposition to say traffic going east and west to get to 2 points within the county, it's nice to have roads that are somewhat direct across these properties. I think there is a public argument of connectivity is in the public's interest, especially when it comes to things like safety and welfare, of multiple ways to get in for emergency vehicles and things like that. So are you arguing there should not be a road connecting these 2 roads at all, or it's just the type of road? Which is your argument?
And please, someone correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that there is a channel from east to west to the north and the south within less than a mile. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. So there already is that access way, and I think this really fits in to 2 points. So first, it's what do we want with respect to our neighborhoods? What do we want? Let's see. Okay. Do we want the highly mobile arterial, or do we want the local land access? This bottom blue is where I want my kids playing. That's what I want neighborhoods for.
Which is kind of my question. Are you saying no, or if it's a local road that happens to connect these 2 points, that's okay? Or you're saying we don't want those 2 roads connect? You see the difference there?
So yes, and if I'm not mistaken, we are not saying no roads. You can't have property without roads. We are wanting local subdivision streets. Local subdivision streets are not on the thoroughfare plan, so if you pull up the thoroughfare plan, you're not going to see a lot of these roads which are actually in existence.
Well, let me interject something. Isn't the problem here, the taking problem is a big problem.
Yeah.
and that seems to be a major problem. But then the other thing from the applicant standpoint that you're representing, it seems to me that not only is the cost a problem for them, and then the taking maybe solves that because it forces us to pay for it, but this is a residential area that you're connecting to an industrial area. I mean, that's.
And that's the biggest piece from my standpoint, is that in order for, it seems to me that not only is there no benefit to the applicant with this in terms of increased valuation, because it's literally going to be moving trucks through their residential subdivision, they are losing valuation. And, you know, the subdivision to the west that it's going to be connecting to, I guarantee they have no understanding that there is going to be a connection that's not yet completed in that subdivision that potentially is going to connect all of that industrial development through those subdivisions. And so that property and the property owner in question seems to me a devaluation of what it's zoned to be, which is residential, and residential that's actually a better density than what is even required by zoning.
I concur with everything that was just said, and if I could also add, if you look at these properties, Warren County has a lot of open area, a lot of place for people to play. When you're looking for homes in the area, it's attractive, and from what I see, based upon being able to have a little bit of that nature that is part of, I think, the American experience, and connecting it to industrial isn't safe. It isn't advantageous. We contacted the engineer's office and we asked if there was ever a requirement that a development connect to an industrial thoroughfare as part of the conditions, and they could identify none. If I'm correct there, please someone correct me, because I do believe there's some staffers here. If I'm not mistaken, there is one property where a residential property requested access
Yeah,
because they
we
wanted
just
it.
did that within probably the last year, if you remember. This is
That was the Crooked Tree property.
it's the property,
Near Core 5,
near the golf,
Core 5 Shaker Run.
yeah, Shaker
Shaker
Run,
Run.
yes, thank
Yeah, that
you.
was Shaker Run, that's
And they came, the residents asked for that, and we also provided some sort of light barriers and signage and so forth to try to mitigate trucks coming through there, but provided the residents with access to get to 70, you know, to exit out to get to 75 quicker.
Yeah, what we did was, did we allow them to put a gate in and have no truck traffic?
It was
through truck
some
traffic
sort of
signs?
barriers, I don't remember exactly, but it was some sort of like light barriers. I don't know if it was landscape barriers and signage.
And the
but-
Shaker Run people were the ones that
That
wanted the
requested it.
access.
They requested
We
the
weren't gonna
access.
allow it.
And everybody in question agreed to it.
But then they wanted to do it, but they wanted to restrict it so that no truck traffic would go through their neighborhood.
That's right.
Yeah, we just did something similar on the Racino, where the industrial park right behind it. And do we want 18-wheelers rolling through their parking lot?
Right, so so in the past, we've been very solicitous to protect residential areas from heavy truck traffic. Okay.
I'm going to, in just a moment, turn it over to Mr. Fellerhoff, who represents the property owner who my client is under contract to purchase the property from. I will just end with saying John Candle Homes is not some big, fancy New York developer. It is a local developer. It is a small employer. It employs families in the neighborhood. It desires to bring more families into the community and property that's zoned residential. It's going to support subcontractors, contractors. Thank you so much for your time, and I will turn over to Mr. Fellerhoff unless Mr. Rich Arnold actually, he is the, with MSP Designs, and he's going to speak first. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophia. Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Arnold, McGill Smith Puncheon, 3700 Park 42 Drive, Cincinnati, 45241. I just wanted to come up and just briefly discuss some of the items we've been talking about today. First of all, the project itself, the property itself, the density is 0.3 dwelling units per acre at 44 lots. In your subdivision regs, it doesn't even warrant sidewalks, much less a thoroughfare. I acknowledge, well, before I acknowledge it, I'm going to also tell you, I will tell you right now, I'm not a traffic engineer, okay? We'll put that on the record right now. But when these thoroughfare plans are put together, you know, somebody's envisioning what a reasonable level of service is going to be many years down the road. And we don't know what the market's going to bear at the time these thoroughfare plans are put together. And when you look at the land use plan for Warren County, Deerfield Township versus Mason, there's a very diverse vision of what their use is going to be, in that Mason's they like to have more industrial, and Warren County would like to have a low density residential. Now, if this was a development where we were putting apartments in it, something like that, yeah, maybe so. You'd have a collector road going through there. But the applicant of record is proposing 44 lots, so that density doesn't warrant a thoroughfare in there. Now, as Sophie alluded to, as far as the legalities are concerned, there was a discussion about reasonable connections. And I know that it's the desire of any county engineer to have, you know, a level service for everything, but you can't have that everywhere. But in this particular case, because the density's so low, and the industrial use is not going to migrate to the west, as it's in other comprehensive plans land use. In this case, the reasonable connection would be is if you want to go 75 north, you're going to take 71 to 63. If you want to go 71 south, you're either going to take south 42 to 741 and take it to 71, or you're going to take 741 to the south of 71. So there are reasonable access points to serve this development, and the developments east and west of it. And that's really all I wanted to take the time to lay out to you, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Sir, can you just state your name and address for the record, please?
Good morning, members of the commission. Matt Fellerhoff from the firm Strauss Troy in Cincinnati, 4th and Walnut in downtown Cincinnati. I'm going to try to go brief because this has gone on probably longer than anyone imagined. I represent Route 741 Holdings LLC, who is the owner of the property. That is a holding company for Tufts University. People ask, what is Tufts University doing owning farmland in Southwest Ohio? That's a good question. This property was gifted to Tufts University by Dr. Garman Kodadad. Dr. Kodadad is a medical doctor, had an intense interest in neuroscience. He, as he was getting later in life, wanted to help further beneficial causes that he was interested in, and wanted to make a donation to a university in anywhere in the United States of America which would follow his path of study. He wanted a university that would accept this money and promote what he called, and I'm going to read this because it's the study of the cause of excessive pathological selfishness in humans, which he saw as, well, understandably, the root of many of the problems that our country has. He went around to many universities and centered on Tufts. Tufts was willing to agree to the program of schedule that program of study that he envisioned. There's going to be an endowed professorship and an endowed research fund to further this study of excessive greed. Now, you will hear, as I talk about this, there's some irony in the fact that the money that was supposed to be received from the sale of this property to go to this endowment was to study excessive greed, and my client doesn't want to make waves, but in this instance, its property rights and the value of its property is being damaged significantly by what we see as excessive greed. And that results in the neighboring community's efforts to destroy my client's property rights by putting all of the requirements that a government would have, the costs of government, put it on a private property owner.
Who's showing excessive greed?
The city of Mason, if you really want to call it that way, because.
Well, how are they doing that?
Well, I'm about to get there. So we met with the city of Mason. So there were a few issues, and I'm not going to get into this. One of the issues was we wanted to develop that property. There's sewer on the Deerfield parcel property. That sewer that the city of Mason ran through the parcel with promises that my client could, when it was developed, tap into that sewer. Mason is not allowing that now. Okay. Mason's not allowing that now because Mason.
Wait a second, when did Mason put sewer lines on this property?
That sewer went in.
This isn't Mason's property.
It's not.
Easement they ran over.
Okay, so they got
obtained an
permission
easement.
from the owner, your client?
They
Or
obtained
not
an
your client?
No.
No,
The previous owner,
from
Mr.
Mr. Dr.
Kodadad.
Kodadad, thinking he would increase the value of the property by allowing the sewer to go into the property. Mason will not allow tapping into the property.
Okay, well, so Mason paid Dr. Kodadad?
No, they didn't pay a dime. They didn't pay a
Well,
dime.
what did he get in return for that?
Dr. Kodadad?
Yeah, so Mason
Less
isn't paying for
developable
it.
property.
No. If they were putting sewer lines over, what did they get in return? If they didn't pay him to put the sewer lines over, where are they connecting? The Chestnut Hill property across the other way?
Across. It's not, but the expectation of Dr. Kodadad, and there's a deposition, and I really don't want to get into this too much because it doesn't relate
But
to.
you're telling me that Mason did not pay for that easement?
Mason did not pay, there was language in there that there was $1, but that wasn't paid. Mason did not pay
Sometimes they
for
put $1 in there.
But
if they really
the
want something else.
expectation, Dr. Kodadad's expectation was he was increasing the value of his property because he would then be able to develop the property and the sewer would already be there and he could tap into it.
So there
Mason-
was sort of an unspecified agreement that he wouldn't take anything up front for the easement for them to run the sewer, but in exchange, when he sold his property to someone else, they would be able to, he would gain increased value because it would be able to be developed
Because
at a
utilities are
different.
utilities are expensive.
Because the
They're
sewer
gonna-
would be there, therefore he has sewers on the property that they put, therefore he's being given the sewers as his remuneration.
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
That would, yeah, he would be, that was the expectation, but Mason has not permitted him or John Candle Homes to tap into the sewers unless it annexed, which isn't the worst thing in the world.
Well,
They're
no,
willing to
Mason
do
can
it, but
Mason doesn't have to, Mason can give permission to use the sewers.
Mason can without annexation, but Mason has refused to do
And you're
this.
saying that they did not put that in their agreement with Dr. Kodadad, or at least not in writing when they did this transaction where he didn't get like $1 or something like that. Is that what
It is
happened?
not specifically enumerated in the agreement, and I can get into that detail, but but the other expectation that went along with the requirement for annexation was that the developer build the thoroughfares, thus making some of the property unavailable for development. And these thoroughfares don't allow driveways to attach to them. They're through streets, so you have to build extra roads to to connect to any residential development. To build those thoroughfares, to donate the land to the city of Mason, pay for the cost of building the thoroughfares, which you've already saw some of the values of that, millions of dollars, and make the land less developable. And because of that requirement, John Candle Homes has found a different way of doing this. We tried to work with the city of Mason. My clients came from Boston and met and sat down with city of Mason administrators, and they all swore up and down that if this property isn't annexed, it has no interest in what happens on this property because it's not in Mason and it's not Mason's concern. And so
they said
they
had no
decided to go
interest
to a
in the
different
roadway?
direction.
They
I'm
had
sorry?
They had no interest in the roadway?
That is what was explained to us. But then when John Candle Homes, because there's this contract, decided to try to develop it without the cooperation of Mason. All of a sudden, Mason has submitted an email and this plan, because Mason denied that it had made promises or had any expectations of this thoroughfare to happen to benefit industry. It denied that in that meeting, but now it submits this plan that shows, you just saw that provision there. And so what's happening here is, so this property was on the market for a number of years. There was one buyer that backed out. It was on the market for a number of years. The city of Mason had the opportunity to buy this property. John Candle Homes came in and bought the property, put money down to purchase the property, to use the property. A private individual expressing their property rights in America bought the property and wants to develop it. The city of Mason didn't do it. But what the city of Mason is trying to do is get a roadway that doesn't provide a single benefit to the property for free, just like it already got the sewer across the property for free. It is trying to do that right now. And now that we're working outside of the city of Mason, the city of Mason is asking this board, this commission, to further its development and to take on its effort to deny my client its property rights to get full value out of the sale of its property, and John Candle Homes the opportunity to develop the property to its fullest extent. Yes, a thoroughfare, to get back to your earlier question, the government can make a decision that a thoroughfare is in the best interest of the people. But what the government can't do is require a thoroughfare to be built without paying for it. And it can't require a thoroughfare to be built in a subdivision when it doesn't benefit the subdivision. This is a very low intensity development. There is no requirement for this thoroughfare. The thoroughfare doesn't benefit it. And to leave this on the map requiring, because when they go in for approval for this development, it'll be on the thoroughfare plan, the county will be required to push for that thoroughfare to be built. That is going to be the taking, because it's going to require this developer or any other developer to build the road, pay for the road, and dedicate the road when that road does not benefit. There is no nexus between the development that's proposed and the public improvement that is sought. And that's why the road needs to be removed from the thoroughfare plan. Leaving that road on the township, there hasn't been no annexation. This isn't in Mason. Deerfield Township doesn't want the thoroughfare. It has said it doesn't want the thoroughfare.
Okay,
And
so
what
what
Mason-
did Mason, I know Mason's here, so they're probably gonna explain this. Why do they want to go through a residential neighborhood from their industrial park when they can go north to 63 over to 75, or they can go south and get on Bethany, and which was always the plan, which we expanded, the commission expanded that road, and then go down Butler Warren a short jaunt, and then go over Liberty Avenue to get to I-75. What is the purpose of running truck traffic through a residential area over to I don't understand, over to, north part of Mason Montgomery Road? Why are they doing that?
With all due respect, we asked Mason that question when we had that meeting, and Mason said, well, we don't want to do that. But then Mason has just submitted that plan that shows, and they say in their email, that they have made promises and they have expectations that they've made, the promises they've made to these industrial developers. And so this is
Well, would the industrial developer want to go to 63 to 75, or go down to Bethany to Butler Warren to 75?
I'm only repeating what Mason says, but that's what Mason tells us that it doesn't have any interest in what happens in the township, but then Mason is here fighting over whether the thoroughfare plan gets removed from the township plan.
Okay, we'll see what they say.
Yeah, he's next on the list.
I think I've addressed everything I wanted to
Yeah,
say.
you've done that passionately.
Okay, well.
Counselor, thank you.
Thank
A
you
lot of
very much.
times this job's been boring over the last 20 years. Today, you made it not boring. This is
Well,
really interesting.
I don't hear that all the time.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. So, Neil and Kurt from the county engineer's office. Does one of you want to come up and share your position on behalf of the county engineer's office?
Morning.
Good morning.
Sorry about that. Kurt Weber, Chief Deputy Engineer, Warren County Engineer's Office. Yeah, quite simply, did the Southwest Warren County Transportation Study back in 2005, and you all are aware of all the, improvements that have come out of that. One of the things that we realized when we did that study was the lack of east-west connections. And quite simply, if you look at, the counselor mentioned that there was close connections, close proximity. There's really not. When you look at 741 between Bethany Road on the south to Hamilton Road on the north, it's between 2.2 miles to the first connection of Hamilton Road and 2.5 miles to the second connection of Hamilton Road. So, I mean, ideally, you do, and we've talked about this many times, we're looking at things, from a traffic perspective and trying to spread out the traffic. And so with this thoroughfare connection, you would have the 1 mile spacing between Bethany Road to this proposed thoroughfare plan connection.
What are you connecting to? When you
Mason
say
Montgomery
connection,
Road, yeah,
what are you
so-
trying to connect to? Are you trying to connect to I-75?
No, basically 741 is an arterial on the east.
So you're trying to connect.
And Mason Montgomery on the west
Wait,
is a collector.
Kurt, are you trying to connect 741 to Mason Montgomery Road?
Yes, sir.
And you got a Bethany connection for that, right?
Yeah, but we may have to widen Bethany at some point.
Well, you already
to 5
did that.
lane. Well, that's only 3 lanes. We may
I
need
know,
to widen it to
I
5.
thought that was kind of goofy, by the way. I was on Mason Council at the time. I didn't understand
Understand.
why you were doing it for 3 lanes, but that was
Understand.
David.
Well, I understand why.
Okay, well, you got
Yeah,
it.
Mr. Carter
But Kurt, wait a second.
Yes, sir.
Is the connection that you want between 741 and Mason and Montgomery Road, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it just better distributes the traffic, east-west
So
traffic.
you want to run industrial truck traffic through a residential area?
I don't believe there's a lot of industrial truck traffic. Mason
Well, what
probably
is the
can
traffic you're
address that.
talking about?
But traffic in general.
Well, what is
You
the
know,
traffic you're talking about?
Traffic similar to what you see on Duke Boulevard, Innovation Way, Cedar Village Drive. You've got, it's a collector road. I think the Planning Commission refers to it as marginal access, where you don't have, the residential driveways connected to the collector road, but you've got the local subdivision streets connecting to the collector road, and then those residential driveways connect to those local residential subdivision streets.
So
And
you're,
and it works pretty well, I mean, because that way you can have a lower volume of traffic on your local, residential subdivision streets, and, a greater volume on your collector.
well, wait a minute. This collector road, though, is proposed to go right smack dab through the center of this subdivision. So essentially, what you're creating, based on what you're telling me around connection, is 2 different subdivisions now. You have a subdivision that will be created to the north of that proposed collector road, and a separate subdivision to the south of that proposed collector road. It's really no longer a singular subdivision or neighborhood, if you will.
You could do it that way, correct?
And so from the engineer's perspective, you all are just looking for better east-west connection. It's not this particular place, it's just the one that you happen to have now, since the others haven't been able to be connected.
Right, I mean, this is the only one that I can think of, that's been on the thoroughfare plan since 2005. But, yeah, I mean, that's, there's already the Batchy Way Street, and plus right-of-way from where the street ends to this property. So, I mean, if this doesn't happen, there won't be an east-west
So if
connection.
this wasn't going to be developed at all, and the previous homeowner or landowner still lived there, and he was gonna live there for 100 years, would he ever have been expected to build at his own expense this connector road between what I understand is to be industrially zoned property and a residential neighborhood on its boundaries?
If he developed the property.
But if he didn't develop the property, if he just continued to live there, was there any circumstance where government would require that to go through because you have it on a thorough plan from 2005?
No, not unless there was, the commission decided that there was for the public good and the public project should be.
And then the county would
Yes.
have to purchase the property from him,
Correct.
or some sort of easement right, but probably given the
Right.
35-mile-an-hour speed, that's a pretty substantial roadway. And so it's like on the thoroughfare plan, it's like, we'd kind of like to do this if he'd ever sell his property or be interested in developing it. That's what it means to be on the thoroughfare plan.
Correct.
So, you were here, Kurt, when we had this subdivision up north, and we had all these people who were really concerned about taking a heavy traffic through their subdivision, going at a fast rate of speed through a residential area, and we then modified it with your all guys' concurrence to narrow the road down and to allow parking and allow residences to be on it, and to basically make it so that it wasn't this kind of big route for cut-through traffic. Remember that discussion? And you were in agreement with it. Why doesn't that apply to this? Why is it that we would?
Two different things.
Well, no, but it's not two different things, because it's a residential area.
Those streets are still going in.
What's that?
Those streets in Green Meadows Way are still going in.
Yeah, but here's the difference. Isn't the difference is that you're making this a much bigger road for your thoroughfare?
It's the difference between 36 feet of pavement and 24 feet of pavement.
Well, that was the
If the
thing.
commission wants to go with 24 feet of pavement, that's probably works.
I'm just throwing that out.
And that's what we did on Green Meadows Way.
Well,
or Green
exactly.
Meadows
So is that what you're
subdivision,
proposing, is that we cut down this road so that it's much smaller?
yeah. I'm not proposing that, but if you did a situation where it connected or didn't connect and just had the thoroughfare street go through there, because I'm not sure, I guess the applicant, are they gonna connect to the collector? Talking about connecting to a collector, where are they gonna connect? Which collector are they gonna connect to? Are they gonna collect to Windermere Way, which is a collector? I don't think it's built all the way to the boundary line. And then, well, I think that's a collector, Mason can speak to that, but I do believe, obviously Bethany Road's a collector.
Yeah, but it's
Talk about
yours.
the need to connect to a collector.
Right, I mean, you're,
Yes, that needs to be considered.
apparently your boss is coming in to say
Yes.
something here.
Thank you, yes.
You did.
Lifeline. I'm tapping out.
Phone a friend.
First, I want to.
Usually he doesn't answer.
First, I wanted to bring up a little history behind why we're here. And that's when we developed the thoroughfare plan back in, or updated in 2005, and it was following the Southwest Warren County Transportation Study that Kurt referred to, that we were looking for more east-west connection. We had something from Brewer Road running eastward to 741 and line up with Bunnell Road. Mason, at that same year, I believe Mason came up with a thoroughfare plan. They were, I don't know the timing of it, but the property along 741, north of Bethany Road, it was owned by a farmer. I don't know if he was a farmer, but he farmed it, and he wanted to sell it as residential property. He was also having some other issues with regard to wetlands and whatnot. But that property sold and became a commercial industrial development after we had come up with after Mason had come up with their thoroughfare
You
plan.
see, Neil,
So-
that was the property I was talking about before.
Yeah, Tom
That was
Davidson.
That was owned by an individual,
Tom
Nair,
Davidson.
one of the Nair companies, tried to develop it for 20 years as a commercial industrial site. They were unsuccessful doing that, and they asked to change the zoning to residential zoning. We declined in Mason. I was on council at the time, and then as a result of declining it, we bought the property. That's what happened. And then, so I'm very familiar with that because I was there during that decision-making.
So, but with that, I'm trying to get the timing of everything. So Mason came up with their thoroughfare plan, which we based our update in 2015. We picked up that change and put it in our plan. And so now we're, 3 years later, the property that the doctor owned that deeded to the Tufts University, that happened after that. So, and now we've got an issue with sewers. But we were working with the developer on this connection. We thought that we had something worked out, but and we would have been okay with the local street at that time. We were looking at maybe a no-load street. We thought we had things worked out, and then they came back with another development plan, and then I think, as I understand, they couldn't get the sewer that they wanted. So at this point, what I would recommend is you can, conclude the hearing today, not make a decision, and just really, we can think about what we, I'm willing to go back to the developer and work out something with them. I think he needs at least one more connection, maybe not to 741, but he really needs another connection because he's only got one, he's coming off of a collector on, I believe it's on Mason's section. It doesn't run, as Kurt was pointing out, it doesn't run as a collector up to the property line. It is a local street. So, but I'm willing to work with them on something that gets another access point, because I have a problem with these subdivisions having only one access point to get into these.
Neil, couldn't he have Batchy Way and Windermere Way?
Yes.
You could have both
That's
of
what
those.
I would say.
All right. Well, thanks, Neil. I mean, my thoughts on this, number one, you commissioned the Southwest Warren County Transportation Study. I was chairman of it.
Right.
And I knew what we were trying to do at the time. There is a need for east-west connections between two interstates that run through, and talk about being blessed and sometimes cursed. You have 75 and 71 going through Warren County. Naturally thinking, from a planning standpoint, you want to have connectivity between those two because traffic is like smoke. It flows wherever it's the easiest. And so that natural connection happens on Tylersville Road. Tylersville Road is a mess, and it's been a mess, and it wasn't adequately planned for. So then the next upgrade to that was Bethany. And Bethany, the engineer folks, came in and said, we want to make this a 5-lane thoroughfare all the way through. And this room was filled with people, hundreds of people, that came in and hated that idea. Why are you making my road and where my driveway, I'm going out there and getting mail, you're making it into Tylersville. It's already existing, it's already built out, it's already residential. And we, and I think led by me, said no, we weren't gonna do that. We improved Bethany and we retained right-of-way, but yet we weren't going to do it unless it became absolute desperation.
No, we did not get the right-of-way for a 5-lane.
Oh, we didn't? I thought
did not,
we did.
No.
I know we did the
We could
3, and
not-
I thought we
could
had the
not use
right
federal-
to.
We could not use federal dollars to acquire extra right-of-ways. We just acquired it for 3. If we ever do, widen it to 5 lanes, we're gonna have to acquire more.
Okay, fair enough. And Counselor, this is why I was asking about questions about, is it in the public's interest to connect? And I think it is. But, and Neil and I know, and again, I respect you so much, if you're telling me this was where one of our lines was drawn, so be it, that's where one of our lines is drawn. But the world has changed in almost the last 20 years, and now we have a situation where, and Kurt, we don't know what those future industrial developments there in that office park, or in the industrial park are. The land immediately adjacent to this that the city owns, or had controlled at least, is light industrial. I'm not sure what the rest of it is. Maybe it's light industrial, what have you. Maybe light industrial involves trucks, a lot of times. So we don't know, looking 10, 20 years into the future, what this is going to be. And it doesn't make really any sense for me to say we're trying to force a collector road into this situation where, for whatever reason, no one bought this property. If this would have been part of Mason's industrial development, then it would have been a much different deal, because Batchy Way is north of all the residential development, so it's not running through a neighborhood, although it is immediately adjacent to a school that's going to be there 20, 30, 50 years from now, or what have you. So now we're going to have the collector road coming out right immediately adjacent to a school. Right. Okay, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. But what we do know is now we've got because again, I look at these things when they're tough issues I take a step backwards and say, what are we as a commission trying to achieve? And one of the most paramount things to us is private property rights. That is certainly a big deal to us. And we're also trying to say, what's in the public's interest? What makes this a better place to live? And we also try to have some common sense of, there is no common sense to say, we have an industrial development immediately adjacent to a residential property, and it's going to be more of it, and now we're going to run that traffic into Mason Montgomery Road, which really doesn't lead to a lot of places. I mean, it's one thing if we were talking about Brewer Road, an existing road that we can widen, we connect over 741. Okay, I get that. That's going to be a tough decision at some point. But to say that it kind of, here we have industrial meandering through, one of our other priorities is low-density housing, which checked the box, which is what John Candle Homes is doing, 44 homes on this. We like that. And then it's emptying into north of a high-density development with a school across the street from it. That's where it's abutting. So from my perspective, Neil, even though I really like, connectivity inside of the county, I'm having a hard time grasping this from the standpoint of industrial. You can't access your driveway off of this collector road, emptying out into Mason Montgomery Road next to a school, and we're really trying to encourage that flow of traffic there? I don't know that I see that.
That's if the school develops the way they've originally thought it would be used for. And I don't know that that's going to happen, but we'll see.
Right, whether it's a school or another high-density development, because that's going to be the city of Mason, so their zoning is a lot more higher density. They like more density, generally. So it's going to be a collector road emptying out into high density.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that, considering the development in that particular area, that residential for this particular parcel is the right thing, but that's what it is, so.
It is right, and if it's not the right thing, then somebody should have bought it.
Right.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Neil.
Okay, thank you.
You got something else?
Anything else? No, I don't.
No, okay.
Oh, come on, Kurt, talk some more.
That's all I've got.
Well, I mean, I'm really interested to hear what Mason has to say, or if somebody else here
Well,
has
I'd
to.
like to hear from Deerfield Township first. And then we'll hear from, is Turtle Creek Township here? Oh, yeah, there you are, I'm sorry.
Good morning, Commissioners. Eric Reiners, Administrator of Deerfield Township. I don't have anyone here to bail me out like Kurt did, and I hope you bring the same passion as this council. So, thank you for hearing us this morning. All the facts have been stated at this point, and as you can see from the letter, the Deerfield Township trustees clearly do not want this east-west collector to be built through this residential development. Our planning documents show this as a single-family residential development. What's being proposed is very low density. We are strongly in favor of that. Any type of collector through this development is only going to be a detriment to the development and a burden back to the township. We don't want to maintain a collector through a residential development. We hear on a daily basis traffic concerns, safety concerns, anything above 25 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood will be problematic for Deerfield. As you said, and Mr. Young stated, the planning document is over 20 years old showing that collector through there. Things have changed, right? We know that this is now going to be a residential development with what's being proposed. So we're strongly in favor and supportive of the developer's request to waive and vary from the thoroughfare plan.
Are you concerned about the fact that this is a connection from an industrial commercial area into a low-density residential area?
Very much so. That's the main point of concern, is that industrial traffic going into a residential neighborhood, in addition to the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. I mean, none of us want truck traffic going through a residential neighborhood. I'm happy to answer any questions, but just thought I'd keep it brief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, come on up. You were hiding back there.
Good morning. Turtle Creek is the same opinion
It's
as Deerfield
state name.
Township. I'm sorry, Tammy Boggs, Turtle Creek Township Administrator. Turtle Creek is of the same opinion of Deerfield. We don't want a collector going through a residential development either. If you want the east-west connection to be a collector, a residential street, that's a little bit different, but they don't support the collector street going through either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, City of Mason.
Well, thank you, Board. I really didn't have any intention to speak
State
today.
your name.
Jeff Forbes, I'm the Law Director for the City of Mason, 6,000 Mason Montgomery Road. Again, the city didn't have any real intention to speak today. We were here just to see what was happening, but somehow.
Can I ask you a question about that then, Jeff? And you're gonna speak, of course, but why were you all here if you didn't wanna talk?
I'll tell you why, because same reason we submitted the letter to Regional Planning Commission. Which, by the way, if you read the last lines of that letter, we specifically say Mason is supportive of development of the subject properties, does not want to impede any future development. The goal of our letter then, and the only reason we were here today, was to correct misleading and factually incorrect statements that were made in the application about what may happen on City of Mason, or on property in the City of Mason.
Does
adjacent.
Mason care about this collector road going through there?
We would, I mean, Mason cares that it's on the thoroughfare plan, but
No,
we
I mean,
also
Does
recognize.
Mason wanna connect its industrial development area through this residence and have through traffic? Does Mason want that?
Mason would have preferred that the existing thoroughfare plan be maintained. But we also recognize it's not in our jurisdiction. It's up to this board. You can do whatever you want to do, and Mason will make any adjustments it has to. Again, we were only here because the application said some kind of strange comments about what could happen on Mason, on property within the City of Mason. They've clearly abandoned that argument. They didn't even bring it up today, so we weren't going to address anything. But somehow, today's discussion about what should happen to the county's thoroughfare plan all of a sudden centers on the City of Mason. We don't have a dog in this fight. We're out of it. It's
But
not
you
in our
do have a dog
jurisdiction.
in the fight, because you're our largest city, and one of the things we did from a planning perspective is, years ago, tried to get our cities and townships on the same page of saying, where does it make sense to have these things come together? And so if you're showing us this, saying, we like this, this is our plan, and then we want this not to dead end on the end, but actually to empty out on Mason Montgomery roads, you are germane to this discussion. And do you want that, as Commissioner Grossman said, do you really want that? Or it's more, it would be nice to have that? That's what we were asking.
Maybe the city engineer is here, he may be better suited to answer that. I guess what I can say is, yeah, development happened because everyone looked at what the thoroughfare, both the city thoroughfare plan and the county thoroughfare plan showed, and so that's how development progressed. Now, there's a proposal for a different type of development, and if you need to adjust the thoroughfare plan, if you feel that that's appropriate, you can do that. And by the way, it's not the city of Mason, it's your engineer that recommended that that connector stay there. And the city of Mason is perfectly happy with that. If that's the only connector that stays across there, that's fine with us. Again, we were just here to make sure that the inaccuracies that were stated below didn't make it here, and they didn't.
So can you tell me who, so let's just, for the sake of argument, say that we approve this connection. Who pays for the connection in the subdivision to the east of this property where it's not connected to the property line? I'm sorry, west, I'm
To the
sorry,
west.
yes,
You're-
thank you.
Batchy.
Yeah,
Right, so you're talking about across the property that's been the
Yes.
subject here.
yes, I'm talking about who, the property to the west, where there's a terminal point there, and it's dotted line to the property line. Who pays for that up to that property line?
Well, that property, you're talking about the property that's in Deerfield.
No,
that-
I'm talking about the
Batchy Way.
property in Mason.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, the section of Batchy Way that's not.
Yes.
It's not done. That very clearly, whenever the school, the Board of Education that owns that vacant property to the north, when that property gets developed, that will be required to extend Batchy Trail the rest of the way. That's why the Board of Education dedicated it as right-of-way, because they know it has to be extended the rest up to that property line.
And so do the property owners that would now be backed to that newly created thoroughfare, do they know that that is a connection?
Do they know that it's a connection that, I mean,
Do they know that their backyard now, which is open, is now gonna have a 35-mile-an-hour road behind it? I know it's on the thoroughfare
that's what I
plan.
was just gonna say, it's on the thoroughfare.
I've never
plan,
looked
so-
at the thoroughfare plan when I purchased a home. I suspect that those people haven't either.
Sure,
But I'm curious, because of the school, has there been any discussion with those property owners
I
about
can't
it?
speak to that, I don't know. See, I'm getting saved now by my boss.
You know how many tomatoes back there, right?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Hey, Kurt, why did you guys
Kurt
submit?
Seiler, City
yeah,
Mason.
I'm sorry,
Thank
why did
you.
you, I'm sorry, and I should have let you do that. Why did you guys submit the plan you did? That letter, what was the purpose of that? And with the road connections?
Yeah, why did we, in part because the application that was submitted to modify the thoroughfare plan, one of their arguments was, oh, this is never going to happen because on one side, Batchy Trails never got connected over to the property line, and on the other side, nothing's going to happen. So they refer to it as a road to nowhere. The reason we showed you that is because some of that roadway is constructed already, and some of it as related to when the city, you were right, by the way, the city of Mason owned that property. They have since sold almost all of it to other users, and part of those contracts require those users to construct the roadway. So we only submitted that just, again, to sort of dispel this idea that, oh, this is a road to nowhere.
Yeah, but right here, see, I kept on thinking that what Mason would be interested in is for your industrial commercial areas that are shown in your map, would want to facilitate your industrial commercial traffic to 75. I thought that was the idea. And the new thing that's really occurred here is that you now, since this all was done, have this major interchange over there on Liberty Avenue and a really new big development with a new expansion of road up 63 over to 75 in Monroe. And isn't that the routes that you want to go to with your industrial area from your thing? You want to connect to 75 through that. And we've already got a big connection through Mason on Tylersville Road from 71 to 75 with, 4 or 5 lanes. And and when I was on council, we were trying to find a way to shunt traffic around to the north of Mason, not come through 42, not go through town, which was the whole Bethany thing. And then they ultimately did the Bethany 3-lane thing. I didn't know about the restriction on 5 lanes. I thought it should always be 5, but okay, that's when I was on Mason Council. But isn't now the whole bit, I mean, you're not trying to have this thoroughfare through a residential area to get to 75. So you don't really have a big dog in this fight with that.
No, I would reiterate what Kurt and Neil talked about. The whole traffic grid is a network that all works together. And usually, when you have cut-through traffic, you have speeding, that's a symptom usually of a integrated network that doesn't have these extra east-west streets. So people have to cut through, and that's where you get additional volumes. When you have evenly distributed network of roads, they all work together, and that's like Neil talked about, having second connections. If there's a fire or some issue, or a moving truck is blocking a road, people have other ways to get in and out of their subdivision. And realistically, our industrial development is going to use 741 to get to 63, or take 741 south down to I-71. And this is more for the residential traffic. One thing I'd like to mention too is the subdivision to the south, Windermere, very nice residential subdivision, has a collector street. You know, you talked about going through the middle of it. Greenbrier, very nice residential subdivision in City Mason. Snyder Road goes right through it. Snyder Road to the south has plenty of commercial and retail on it as well. Even in Deerfield Township, they rezoned a chunk of property on Duke Boulevard at Sociable Foster to residential. I think it's called Vintage Oaks. Duke Boulevard's very clearly industrial road. So the fact, like you're talking about how that traffic can't mix, it very clearly can mix, and there's multiple instances. Cedar Village Drive is another example that has residential and it has businesses on it that I think this same developer that's proposing here is building a subdivision on. So
Yeah, but they don't
it
front
happens all the time
houses
throughout
on
the
those
county.
streets. Snyder Road doesn't have houses on the road you're talking about fronting on
Right,
the street.
yeah, right,
Cedar
'cause it's
Village
built as a
Drive doesn't
collector
have
street.
houses fronting on the street.
Right.
So if you say that they can't have anything fronting on this street, that's what they've said, is that really detracts their value. But my only question to you guys was, you really don't need this thing for your industrial traffic. That's all I was asking.
For our industrial development, no.
Okay, well then,
No,
so
it's
that
a
means it's
convenience
not
for
really valuable
residents.
to you for your industrial commercial area.
And then to answer Commissioner's question about do those residents know, many of them, because that's a front yard, they have a front yard in the rear of their yard. They've come to ZBA to get variances for that when they've done decks and different things like that. So those residences are well aware that road right-of-way exists and that road will be extended in the future.
And so another question, since you've got both of you up here, and I don't know if you got the portfolio on this thing. I mean, if you guys really, really wanted this, and you really wanted like to extend your industrial area over, you could make a bid to buy this property from the very passionate gentleman from Strauss and Troy, who made a very persuasive argument, but you don't want to buy the property.
Well, the property's under contract.
Well, I
So it's
understand
immaterial.
that, but you never have thought about buying the property. That isn't something you consider doing or trying to do.
I don't think it's anything we could even
Okay,
talk about.
I just was
I mean,
wondering,
it's-
because it seems to me, and that's, Jeff, what we did on the property that you're now developing across from Avalon, et cetera. Because I mean, I know you weren't there, Ken Schneider was, but they came in to change the zoning to residential because for 20 years they tried to develop it, they couldn't. And then when we wouldn't let them do it, we bought the property, which I thought was the right choice because we didn't give them the zoning they wanted. And as David said, we're very strongly support personal property rights. And here in this case, what's interesting is you've got the two jurisdictions, the political jurisdictions who oppose this, who basically are favoring the applicant's position, and you've got the owner of the property that's asking us to do something. And in my reading of the law, if we keep this, there very likely is a taking where we have to buy it, which I'm not really interested in as a commissioner in doing, which is why I'm kind of coaxing you guys to go buy it. But I understand that you're not interested, or you can't, or something. Okay, thanks.
Right, your right answer is okay.
Right, sorry, I thought I was gonna bring it back down boring, but maybe not.
I don't wanna put words in your mouth, okay? But I get it.
Okay, unless there are any other questions, that's really all we have.
We appreciate you guys coming.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else here that wants to speak on this matter?
My only question to the applicant or the engineer would be, where is your access point? So for the 44 homes, how are they getting here?
The access point would be through Windermere Way. Now, speaking of access points, I know there was a suggestion of you to table this thing, so to speak, and bring it up at a different time. But today, we're talking about whether or not it's a thoroughfare. We're not talking about the ultimate locations of the access points, because even if you approve all removal of all thoroughfares today, when we come in with a subdivision plan through Warren County Regional Planning, we still have to apply for access variances if we only want to have the connection to Windermere Way. So I'd like to, as you're making your decision today, keep that in mind that, you know, just because you remove them all doesn't mean that it doesn't state how many access points we're gonna have. The other thing is that I know there's been a little bit of back and forth about the truck traffic and whether or not there was an intent not to have truck traffic. If there's a thoroughfare, there's gonna be truck traffic. And,
Well, on the question of access, so through Windermere, but certainly you're gonna come up Windermere and you're probably gonna go off and connect to Batchy. And then probably you're gonna come off 741 for that Turtle Creek property, and you're gonna go and connect your subdivision from the north with a connection from 741 in and then down to the Windermere connection, something like that. Is that what's gonna occur? Or not, you haven't even thought about that?
well, I don't believe we planned on tying towards Batchy Trail for the
Okay.
same reason that.
So you just
we
wanna
talked
have an
about.
access in from Windermere?
And 741. We'll definitely, yeah, we'll need access to 741 as well.
Okay.
And that's a matter that the RPC has jurisdiction over, not you.
Okay, good.
All right.
Then we don't have a dog in that fight, which is great today.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention is there were some subdivisions that were brought up that there's thoroughfares or collector roads that go through them. The Windermere, the Greenbrier, those densities and those subdivisions are much greater, which would help pay for the cost of that collector road, in which this case, we can't afford it.
It wasn't lost on me.
All
Well,
right.
and that goes back to the strangeness of, and I don't know how this happened, that we got, before my time when I was in Mason Council, we apparently got sewer rights without paying for it. And they got sewers running around this property, but they can't use them. So these people have to do what they're proposing now, and they're proposing something that we've always favored, which is nicer homes, lower density, and the two jurisdictions that are involved, Turtle Creek and Deerfield, are saying, we don't want this, we favor what this applicant wants, which is your proposal too, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so, Bruce, do you have anything you want to add before we?
You'll need to close the public
Yeah.
hearing. And then you need to entertain a motion, whether to amend the Warren County Official Thoroughfare Plan by removing one or both of the collector roads on the Deerfield parcel, and either removing or not removing the collector on the Turtle Creek parcel from the Official Thoroughfare Plan.
Should we ask Neil why he asked us just to delay that?
Okay. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Okay, discussion.
Well, my touchstone with all of this is, first, what does the property owner want? My paramount interest in every single property case is always looked at, the person who has the most legitimate interest in it is the owner of the property, and the people who have invested in this property. Second, I look to see what the jurisdictions, the political jurisdictions want. In this case, you've got Deerfield and Turtle Creek. And third, we look at the overall scheme of our plans with regard to the interest that the engineers brought forward, which I think are all legitimate. But it seems to me that even taking that into consideration, and Mason being sort of equivocal about it, because I thought they were going to be stronger than they were maybe on this, but they're not, and that's fine. Because I think that Mason has invested a lot of money, and they've got a legitimate interest to have traffic from their industrial areas to get up to the highways, which I think they already have. And in fact, there's been a lot of development to make that work with the expansion that we're spending a lot of money on through 63. And of course, you're going up there through obviously 741. And so I don't see strong reason to not agree with the applicant, but I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. It seems to me that those reasons that I've just mentioned favor the applicant, and I didn't see anybody really opposing the applicant.
Yeah, from my perspective, I guess almost 20 years now, the two things I know is I've gotten older. I don't know that I've gotten wiser, but the development world has certainly changed, and the world has changed. Liberty Way now exists with that new great intersection right there onto 75. You've got 63, the interchange there, which is fantastic, and doing nothing but going to get better because we are in the middle of widening State Route 63 from 741 heading west, so it will be just almost a straight shot for any traffic that wants to get on 75 going north. You've got better ways to get onto 71 now than existed in the past. So I think that the landscape, because I'm trying to just justify, do we want east-west connections? We do. But when you look at the actual map of this one, it's a industrial park through low-density housing, dead-ending into Mason Montgomery Road. That is the reality of it. And how that dramatically improves traffic and congestion in the area, not just today, but looking 20 and 30 years out, because this board, we've tried to actually be intentional and look ahead and do things for the future, because the world will change. Under those contexts, I don't believe that this mandatory collector road through a low-density residential development, which is our number one type of residential development, as Mr. Trouth well knows here in this county, that we like higher-end, low-density developments. That is very good for our county, and we try to encourage those things. And why we would put a collector road across the middle of it that will have truck traffic, will not be able to access individual driveways and things like that, and then it will simply dead end probably next to a school and on the backside of a higher density residential area into Mason Montgomery Road. I just don't really see that from my perspective.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything additional to add other than that I feel the same way that for me the first requirement is around the rights of the property owner, and I've always taken that seriously and that haven't wavered in that. And I think this has the added benefit of the political subdivision in which this property is located likes what the applicant has put forward, and they oppose the thoroughfare being located. And while I at the same time have great respect for the county engineer and the deputy engineer and understand what their interest is, and hope that that the applicant, if this is to move forward with their development, works with the engineer to be able to provide something suitable for the greater good of the community that respects the development and the property rights. It's kind of a no-brainer from my standpoint, especially in light of nobody really saying we absolutely have to have this because, in light of a lot of disinterested parties, but those who are passionate are with the applicant, that's where I would end up.
Plus, we want to be on the right side of that Tufts course on greed, and that we want to, and that's case
We'd
study.
be the case study.
And that case study is studied 20 years from now. I want to be on the right side of that. Spell my name right. I'll make a motion to amend the Warren County Thoroughfare Plan, road reclassification and deletion of collector roads in Deerfield and Turtle Creek Townships for the discussed property.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Bruce, do you have anything else to bring before the board today?
I'm happy to say I do not.
We're happy to hear that. Tiffany, anything?
I do not.
Okay. It doesn't appear that there's anybody else here to speak to the board. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And yes.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I thought Mason was an actual